Hello, everybody. We are doing the poem Father to Son by Elizabeth Jennings. Elizabeth Jennings was an English poet, and she had always a clear style in her poems and literary styles, and was very simple in her expression. This poem, it talks about the anguish, the pain, the regret of a father who does not have a good relationship with his son. His son is now grown up and is busy in his own life. And the father is bitter about the generation gap between them and the feeling of separation. He shares his feelings by saying he doesn't know much about him and there is no sign of understanding, there's no sign of communication between them. He wants their relationship to be just like when his son was a child. Then they had a very nice relationship, full of understanding and love. He's trying his best to find a solution to the issue, but all efforts are in vain. They are useless. Therefore, they are drifting apart with every passing day. This communication gap, this generation gap, this lack of understanding is, increasing day by day. Now, I would like to point out here that this poem basically talks of generation gap as termed now. And the poem does not just talk of an exclusively personal experience of his as a father, but it is generation gap is a fairly universal phenomenon. Children these days, in their effort, to keep level with the changing values, they lose somewhere the track of their roots, of their family, of the ties, of the bonding with their family and family members. They find the values they inherit from their parents overbearing. They are not able to tolerate the values that the parents might have given to them when they were small. Parents are very protective and they try to protect them from making mistakes, and finally and ultimately this leads, when the parents are being protective and trying to protect them from making mistakes, this leads to a clash of ideologies. This leads to lack of understanding and communication, finally leading to generation gap. So this is the theme of the poem. In other words, the poet of this poem highlights the theme of the generation gap, which crops up, which emerges due to lack of communication, acceptance, and change of views and ideas. The poem reveals the internal conflict that a father undergoes when his son grows up and has his own interests, ideas, and perceptions about everything in life. Now, let us begin reading the poem. This is the first stanza of the poem. I do not understand this child, though we have lived together now in the same house for years. I know nothing of him, so try to build up a relationship from how he was when small. Yet, have I killed the seed I spent, or sown it where the land is his and none of mine? In these lines, I refers to the helpless father. The father is the speaker in the poem. So the father is talking about the stressful relationship he has with the son now, and he wishes to have an amicable is a relationship full of love, full of understanding, and a friendly relationship with his son once again. Now, so the father in the stanza shares his feelings about his relationship with his son. He says that although they both have been living together in the same house for many years, yet he doesn't understand him. Now, please note that he does not say, I do not understand my child. He calls his own child as this child, Why so? Because the father is somewhere frustrated with the son, because the son has a cold, he is not full of warmth for his father. He has a cold and indifferent behavior that irritates and frustrates the father, and so he addresses him as a stranger, as not his own son, and that is why as a stranger he calls him, that he does not understand this child, this strange child that is in front of him. So they've been living there in the same house under the same roof for many years, but the father is not able to understand the child. I know nothing of him. So the father feels that he does not understand his own child. He seems to not know anything about his own child. Maybe it's because of the unpredictable behavior of his son, or because the cold and indifferent approach that the son has towards his father. So because of these reasons, he says he doesn't understand, he doesn't know anything about his son, his likes, his dislikes, his interest, his hobbies, nothing at all. So what does he do? So try to build up a relationship from how he was when small. So what the father tries to do? He tries to build up, he tries to improve his relationship with his son, recalling the moments when his son was a child. Then the relationship was very good. It was full of love, warmth, and understanding. So he wants to start afresh by recalling those moments when the son was a child. And so he says, when my son was a small child, I am trying to recall what made our relationship stronger then, and maybe thinking about those moments, working upon the same lines, I will be able to develop a very good understanding with my child once again. Yet, have I killed the seed I spent, or sown it where the land is his and none of mine? So, in these lines, the father is trying to, feel or take the responsibility of, this strange relationship, of this killed relationship. He tries to recollect his childhood and recall how he behaved as a child, so that they could have a better psychological understanding, psychological insight. The father could have a better insight of the behavior to improve the relationship with his son. But he feels, he wonders, yet have I killed the seed I spent? A metaphor has been used here. He is referring himself to a gardener, he is a gardener like father, who made all possible attempts to help his child grow under his shade. But all his efforts went vain, went in vain, went useless. So he says that he wonders whether it is he himself who is responsible for the failure of the relationship. He somewhere holds himself responsible. He feels that essentially a part of the relationship between the father and the son has been destroyed by the father himself, because he feels that maybe lack of understanding, maybe this communication gap, all this was because of the father did not try to understand and grow side by side, or grow along with his son as he was growing too. When the parents need to have a better understanding with their children, when they they pass the stage of childhood, the parents have to grow along with their children to have a better understanding. They have to somewhere accept the changes in values, in tastes, in habits of their children, and somewhere the children also have to accept the traditional values that the parents have inherited in them. But the father feels that he himself somewhere has been responsible for such an estranged, such a stressful relationship. The land is his and none of mine. This line is very important. The land refers to, I told you a metaphor has been used here. He is considering himself a gardener, where he saw the seed in the land of somebody else, and the land here refers to the son's body, the son's soul. So the poet's son must have told him that his life is his own, and the father has got nothing to do with it. So the father, however, takes his right over the son. He exercises his right over the son because he felt that he was his son. So thus this expression, the land is his and none of mine, this expression expresses the father's emotional sense of shock and grief at degeneration of his relationship with his son. He feels because the land was his, because it was his mind, it was his body, it was his soul, it was his understanding, where he saw the seed of his family values. And none of mine means the land did not belong to the father. The land where he is trying to sow the seed of understanding and good relationship is it is now belonging to the son. The son has now grown up and he feels that the father has no right to interfere in his life. We speak like strangers, there's no sign of understanding in the air. So here the father feels that he acknowledges his role in the communication gap in the previous stanza between them. He feels that he is responsible. He says this, despite all these efforts, despite all the efforts that he has made, his son was in a place, his son was somebody that the father cannot have an access to. He cannot reach his mind, he cannot reach his soul, where he can sow the seed of understanding, sow the seed of love. They used to talk to each other like strangers, and there was no sign of understanding between them. He feels that his child looks like him, but he doesn't know what his son loves, what his son doesn't understand him. We speak like strangers, there's no sign of understanding in the air. This child is built to my design, yet what he loves I cannot share. Now the poet, and we of course refers to the father and the son, the poet and his son, they speak like strangers with each other. There's no sign of understanding in the air. There's no indication that there is understanding between both of them. There is lack of understanding and lack of communication between them. The father says, this child is built to my design, yet what he loves I cannot share. The son is the dream child of the father. The child has inherited his father's genes biologically. Perhaps he has taken after him. Taken after him is he almost looks like him. He resembles his father biologically and physically, and he has been brought up on the lines the father wanted him to. The father gave him whatever values, whatever interest he tried to develop in his child. The child took it easily when he was a child. The father not only brought him up according to a design, what he wanted him to be, but also had designs on him. That is, he had great plans for a wonderful life for the son ahead. Yet, what he loves, I cannot share. Yet he says, the child is built to my design. He is exactly like me. He is he has inherited the same values that I wanted him to. Yet there is lack of harmony and understanding. There is lack of communication and compatibility, which stands in the way as an obstacle of a good relationship between the father and the son. He feels that he cannot appreciate, he cannot praise the likes, the dislikes, the interests of his son. What he loves, I cannot share. What he likes, what he dislikes, what he appreciates, I cannot share the same interest, I cannot share the same dislike and like. Silence surrounds us. I would have him prodigal, returning to his father's house, the home he knew. Rather than see him make and move his world, I would forgive him too, shaping from sorrow a new love. Now, the father says, the poet says, that silence surrounds us. Silence here stands, for the harsh, indifferent, and cold behavior that the son shows towards his father. So, there is silence between the two. So, there is no warmth and no friendliness in the relationship between the father and the son. So, there is silence, there is no communication, no understanding between both of them. I would have him prodigal. Now, prodigal actually refers to, it is prodigal means wasteful of one's means. This is a reference to the prodigal son in the Bible, who is accepted and accommodated by the father in spite of having wasted all the money that he had taken away with him when he left the house. So he says, the father here says, with this reference, the father says, I would have him prodigal. I am ready to accept him even though he is a prodigal child. He is the same child as referred in Bible. I would have him even if he is a wasteful son, even if he is extravagant. Extravagant is a person who spends endlessly without any thought. So I would have him prodigal. I would accept him even as a prodigal son, even as a son who is wasteful of money, who wastes money. But what I want is, I want him to return to his father's house. I want him to return to my house, the home he knew, because this house is the home, is the place which he knows about, which he is aware of. Rather than see him make and move his world, the father does not want him to want to see that his son moves to a new world of his and makes his own home a separate place to live. So he says he would prefer that the son should come back home, even though he is a prodigal son, because nothing is dearer to him than his son. So he wants to overlook all the faults, all the mistakes, all the weaknesses of his son, and he is still prepared to pardon him, and he wants to restore the same love, same warmth, same affection and friendliness that was there in their relationship when the child was small. So it gives a glimpse of the father's undying love for his son and his forgiving nature. So he wants to revive the relationship, the same old cordial, affectionate, friendly, loving, warm relationship which he and his son enjoyed during the son's childhood. He wants, the father expects his son to reciprocate his forgiveness and try to mend the torn relationship, the stressed relationship between both of them. I would forgive him too, shaping from sorrow a new love. I would forgive him for all his mistakes, as I said. Shaping from sorrow a new love, I would try to build a new kind of relationship from the grief. Even though I have suffered grief, even though I have suffered some sorrow given by my son. Father and son, we both must live on the same globe and the same land. He speaks, I cannot understand myself. Why anger grows from grief? We each put out an empty hand, longing for something to forgive. Now, father and son, we both must live. The father is saying here that both of us, both the father and the son, both of us must live on the same globe and the same land. Now, same globe and same land refers to the mental world of emotions and feelings at the mental level, and the same land, of course, may symbolize the physical space in the house. So the father is trying to say that both of them have to coexist, they have to exist together, at both the places, both at the globe means mentally and at the land means physically, in order to have a loving and fulfilling relationship. So he says, although he speaks, I cannot understand myself. The father is trying to say here that the child, whenever he speaks something, whenever he reciprocates to my feelings, I cannot understand myself. I myself is not able to, I myself am not able to understand why anger grows from grief whenever he speaks. Why anger grows from grief means I become angry at him. There's a feeling that one is a victim of undeserved injustice and suffering here in these lines. So the father is the one who is a victim of undeserved justice. So he somehow loses temper, he becomes angry, and thus anger grows from grief. That is, it results from the grief, from the pain, from the sorrow, from the anguish that the father is experiencing. We each put out an empty hand. Empty hand again is a metaphor. The father intends to repair the broken relationship, the estranged relationship, the stressful relationship, and both the father and son decide to forgive each other. So both of them try to longing for something to forgive. Longing is wishing, desiring. So they both desire, they both wish, they both long to forgive each other, but unfortunately there is an empty hand that is received by both of them. Empty hand refers to the vain efforts, the waste efforts, the useless efforts that they make in trying to make the relationship cordial and nice again. There is during the dialogue, during the conversation between the two, again the lack of understanding and feeling of self pity by the father irritates both of them, and thus it causes a deadlock. A deadlock is a situation when there is no further productive result, no good effect of the situation. So their desire to forget the sorrows given by each other and forgive each other remains unfulfilled, and that is why the son and the father have an empty hand. Now the literary devices in the poem. Alliteration: silence surrounds us, seed I spent or sown. So in both these cases S sound is repeated. And there is another that I've already discussed, another literary device, that is metaphor. We each put out an empty hand. It refers to the vain efforts, to the efforts which yield to no result at all, made by both of them to improve their relationship, and their achievement is nil. There is no good result of the efforts made by both of them. So they both put out, stretch that empty hand towards each other. And then let us see this also. I've already discussed with you during the explanation. Yet have I killed the seed I spent, or sown it where the land is his and none of mine. In these lines, the poetic devices, again metaphor. The words seed, sown and land, they are metaphors for the father's efforts. I told you the father refers to himself like a gardener who sows the seeds in the land, in the mind of the son. That belongs to the son. So the land is his and none of mine, right? That he made to build, the efforts that he put out, the efforts, the endeavors that he made to build a loving relationship with his son and the son's heart respectively. So land is the son's heart, the son's mind. Seed is sown in the land of son. In another line, I would have him prodigal, returning to his father's house. Again, the poetic device used is metaphor. He has been directly compared, the son here is directly compared to the prodigal son of referred to in the Bible. So dear children, I hope you've understood the poem. Let us put a halt there and do the question answers in the next lesson.